My mother-in-law will walk me down the aisle, not you. You're not even half the woman she is, my son Daniel said when I offered to escort him at his wedding rehearsal. I stood up calmly from my chair in the back row. Perfect. Then she can take over your $1 million debt payments instead. The bride's face went white as Daniel's jaw dropped to the floor. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you how we got to this moment. Because 3 hours ago, I was still playing the role of the grateful mother, quietly writing checks and swallowing insults. My name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm 64 years old, and I've apparently been funding my son's elaborate lie for 2 years without realizing it. The Whitmore family mansion was buzzing with wedding preparations when I arrived that Friday evening. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors. Imported orchids filled every corner, and servers in crisp white uniforms moved like synchronized dancers through rooms larger than my entire apartment. Everything screamed money, real money, old money, the kind my late husband Frank and I never had during our 38 years of marriage, despite working ourselves to the bone at the steel plant and the hospital. Mrs. Sullivan, Patricia Whitmore glided over in her designer gown, something that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. She air-kissed near my cheek with practiced precision. You must be so proud. Daniel has built such an impressive portfolio company. Chelsea's father is absolutely fascinated by his investment strategies. I smiled politely, though something cold settled in my stomach like swallowed ice. Investment strategies? My Daniel worked at Henderson Marketing, a mid-level firm downtown, making decent but hardly impressive money. $52,000 a year, to be exact. At least, that's what I thought. Oh yes, I managed, my voice steadier than my suddenly racing heart. He's always been ambitious. The yacht club is already talking about his membership application, Patricia continued, her diamonds catching the light as she gestured. Young entrepreneurs like Daniel are exactly what they need. Fresh blood, new ideas, substantial assets. Yacht club? Substantial assets? My Daniel, who 3 months ago called me crying because his car needed a $500 transmission repair he couldn't afford? The same Daniel who'd been eating dinner at my apartment twice a week because grocery money was tight? That's when Chelsea appeared, practically floating down the curved staircase in her $1,000 rehearsal dress. Pale blue silk that probably cost more than most people spent on their actual wedding gowns. "Mother Margaret!" she squealed, using the nickname that always made my teeth itch like fingernails on a chalkboard. "I can't wait for you to see the surprise Daniel arranged for tomorrow. The ice sculpture alone cost more than most people's cars." My hands went cold despite the warm spring evening. Daniel had been asking me for temporary loans for months. Small amounts, he always said. Emergency business investments that would pay off big within weeks. Car repairs that couldn't wait. A security deposit for a better apartment. I'd written the checks because that's what mothers do, right? You help your children succeed, especially when they're all you have left in the world. But ice sculptures that cost more than cars? Yacht clubs with membership fees? $1 million debt? That's when the rehearsal director, a stern woman with a clipboard and the authority of a military general, called everyone to places for the walkthrough. And my carefully constructed world began crashing down with 8 simple words that revealed everything I'd been too blind, too trusting, too stupidly loving to see. 3 hours earlier, I'd been arranging flowers in my small apartment, daisies from the corner grocery store, nothing fancy but cheerful, proud that my son had found love with such a successful woman. Chelsea Whitmore came from old money, the kind of family that owned banks instead of borrowing from them, had trust funds instead of maxed-out credit cards. Her father, Robert, controlled a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions, with properties from Manhattan to Miami. Daniel's doing so well for himself, I told my neighbor Mrs. Henderson that morning while watering the tomato plants on my tiny balcony. Finally found a woman who appreciates his drive and ambition. What I didn't know was that Daniel had been spinning an intricate web of lies for 2 years, each thread more elaborate than the last. It started when he met Chelsea at an upscale charity auction for children's cancer research, one he'd attended using a borrowed Armani suit and fake business cards claiming he owned Sullivan Investment Group. Boutique financial services. The first loan came 6 months into their relationship, delivered with his most charming smile and that boyish, apologetic look that had gotten him out of trouble since childhood. "Mom, I need $2,000 for a business dinner with potential investors. Really important clients flying in from Chicago." I'd written the check without a single question, proud that my boy was networking with serious money people. A week later came the call. "Emergency equipment purchase for the office. Can you cover $3,500? The lease on our copier system fell through, and we need to close a deal this week." Then $5,000 for a temporary cash flow issue while we wait for a client payment. Each request came with detailed explanations that sounded so professional, so legitimate. Over 18 months, I'd given Daniel nearly $75,000 from my modest retirement savings. Money Frank and I had scrimped and saved for decades, cutting coupons and skipping vacations and buying generic brands at the grocery store. Money that was supposed to last me through my golden years, pay for medications, and maybe a small nursing home if I couldn't manage alone. Each time, Daniel promised quick repayment with enthusiasm that seemed genuine. "The investment will triple by Christmas, Mom. You'll get everything back plus 20% interest." But Christmas came and went without a word about repayment. Then Easter, when I dropped hints about needing some money returned. Then my birthday, in June, which Daniel forgot entirely because he was too busy planning his engagement to a woman who thought he was wealthy enough to afford her lifestyle. "The Whitmores are impressed by Daniel's business acumen," Chelsea had gushed during our first dinner together at an expensive steakhouse downtown. "Daddy says anyone who can build a successful company from nothing at Daniel's age has real entrepreneurial vision." I'd smiled and nodded, assuming she meant his marketing job at Henderson & Associates. But Daniel had been showing her fabricated financial statements, driving rented BMW and Mercedes vehicles for their dates, and paying for expensive dinners and weekend getaways with credit cards that were already maxed out and accumulating interest at 28% annually. The engagement ring alone cost $45,000, a 3-carat diamond from Tiffany that sparkled like captured starlight. Money he didn't have. Money he'd borrowed against future earnings that didn't exist. Money that would eventually trace back to my steadily emptying bank account and my dwindling future security. But I didn't know any of this 3 hours ago when I was carefully ironing my best navy dress for the rehearsal dinner, the one I'd bought for Frank's funeral 3 years ago. I was just a proud mother whose son had finally found happiness and success, about to discover that my son's happiness was built on a foundation of lies that would destroy multiple lives, starting with mine. The wedding venue was the Grand Bellamy Hotel, a place I'd only seen in magazines featuring America's most luxurious destinations, 5-star accommodations where heads of state stayed, where movie stars held private parties, where regular people like me could barely afford to park in the valet lot. Marble floors polished to mirror perfection, gold fixtures that probably cost more than my annual income, and a ballroom that could hold 300 guests comfortably with room for a full orchestra. The rehearsal dinner alone cost more than I'd made in 6 months as a registered nurse before retiring. I knew because I'd overheard Patricia Whitmore mentioning the catering bill to her sister, $43,000 for one evening. One evening that would feed the same amount of people I used to serve at the church soup kitchen for an entire year. "Daniel spared no expense," Robert Whitmore told the gathering during cocktails, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who'd never had to check his bank balance before making a purchase. A man who invests in quality knows its true value. That's the mark of authentic success, not the flash-in-the-pan wealth you see these days. I watched my son accept congratulations and backslaps from Chelsea's wealthy friends and family members. State senators, federal judges, bank presidents, art gallery owners, people whose children went to private schools that cost more per year than most families' entire income. Daniel looked confident, successful, every inch the prosperous businessman they believed him to be. His posture was different, his smile more assured, even his handshake seemed firmer than usual. But I knew Daniel. I'd raised him alone after Frank died 3 years ago, worked double shifts to pay for his college education, celebrated every small victory, and consoled him through every setback. This wasn't my hard-working, struggling son who called me when his electricity was about to be shut off. This was someone playing a role, and playing it convincingly well. Mrs. Sullivan, a distinguished man with silver hair and a Rolex that could finance a small car, approached me during the appetizer course. I'm James Morrison, Robert's personal attorney and financial advisor. I wanted to personally thank you for raising such an enterprising young man. The prenuptial arrangements show he's bringing substantial assets to this marriage. Prenuptial arrangements? Assets? My Daniel, who'd been living paycheck to paycheck since graduating college 7 years ago. The same Daniel who'd asked me to co-sign his lease renewal last year because his credit wasn't quite good enough? I'm sorry. What specific assets? I asked carefully, keeping my voice neutral despite my racing heart. James looked confused, his eyebrows drawing together in the way people do when they think they've misunderstood something obvious. The investment portfolio, the business holdings, the commercial properties. Surely you're aware of your son's financial position? The documentation shows nearly $2 million in combined assets. The champagne glass nearly slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. $2 million? Daniel had asked me for $40 grocery money last month, claiming his paycheck was late due to a banking error. He was driving a 12-year-old Honda Civic with 180,000 miles and a broken air conditioner that he couldn't afford to repair. "Excuse me," I managed, setting down my glass and making my way toward the restroom on unsteady legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. In the marble-appointed bathroom that was larger than my entire kitchen, I called Daniel's number with shaking fingers. It went straight to voicemail, that generic recording that meant he was probably screening calls. I tried texting. "We need to talk. Right now. Emergency." 20 minutes later, he found me in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, sitting in a velvet chair that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mom, you look pale. Everything okay? You're not having chest pains or anything, are you?" "Daniel," I kept my voice steady through sheer force of will. "Mr. Morrison mentioned your assets, your portfolio, your commercial properties. I think there's been some serious confusion here." His face went white, then flushed red like he was running a fever. "Mom, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you went from asking me for rent money 6 months ago to having $2 million in assets." Daniel's eyes darted around the lobby, checking for eavesdroppers or familiar faces. The lobby was busy with hotel guests coming and going, but no one was paying attention to us. "It's complicated. The business has been growing faster than I expected. I didn't want to worry you with all the details while you were still grieving Dad." "What business?" "Daniel? You work for Henderson Marketing, making $52,000 a year. I've seen your tax returns. That's not exactly accurate anymore." I could see the lies unraveling in real time, written across his face like subtitles in a foreign film. The desperate calculation of a man trying to decide which version of the truth would cause the least immediate damage while buying him the most time to figure out his next move. "Daniel," I said quietly, my voice carrying the same tone I'd used when he was 7 and I'd caught him stealing candy from the corner store. "I need the truth. All of it. Right now." He looked around the hotel lobby frantically, his eyes tracking every person who walked past our secluded corner. Businessmen with expensive briefcases, couples dressed for dinner, hotel staff moving with quiet efficiency. "Mom, can we please not do this here? Chelsea's family thinks you're worth $2 million. Are you?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm opening in the earth. I could hear the distant sounds of the rehearsal dinner continuing without us. Laughter, clinking glasses, the string quartet playing something classical and soothing. Finally, Daniel's shoulders sagged like a deflating balloon. "No, God, no, I'm in debt. Deep debt." How deep? Though I already suspected the answer would destroy me. "About $1.2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow, like someone had punched me in the solar plexus and knocked all the air from my lungs. I gripped the arm of the velvet chair to steady myself, my knuckles going white with the pressure. "Million? Daniel, what have you done?" "It started small," he whispered, glancing toward the ballroom where his rehearsal dinner was continuing without us, where Chelsea was probably wondering where her fiancé had disappeared to. "I met Chelsea at that charity auction 18 months ago. She's incredible, Mom. Beautiful, smart, from this amazing family with connections everywhere. But she's used to a certain lifestyle." "So, you lied to her." enhanced the truth initially, said I had my own investment company, that I was building something special. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I could actually build something real, something worthy of her. I stared at my son, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in years, not as the struggling young man I'd been trying to help, but as a stranger who'd been manipulating me with the skill of a professional con artist. The money you borrowed from me, all those emergency loans, where did it really go? Keeping up appearances. Dinners at restaurants where the wine costs more than most people spend on food in a month, weekend trips to the Hamptons, Charleston, Napa Valley, the engagement ring from Tiffany. Chelsea expects nice things, and her family was watching every move I made to see if I was worthy of their princess. And you thought the solution was to pretend to be someone you're not? I thought I could make it work. I've been applying for better positions, looking for investors who might be interested in my ideas. If I could just buy enough time to build something real. Time for what? To accumulate more debt? Daniel, where did the $1.2 million come from? His face crumpled like wet tissue paper. Credit cards initially, then personal loans from multiple banks using fake employment verification, business loans using fabricated documentation about Sullivan Investment Group. I may have used your address and credit information as co-collateral on some of the larger amounts. The world tilted sideways. Everything in my field of vision seemed to blur except for Daniel's face, which suddenly looked like a stranger's. You used my credit? My house? Daniel, what have you done to me? I'm sorry, Mom. I was desperate. I thought if the wedding went through, if I became part of the Whitmore family business empire, Robert could help me get a real executive position, something that would let me pay everything back with interest. You were planning to scam your way into their family business. It's not a scam. I love Chelsea more than life itself. I'd be good for their company. I have ideas and vision. I just needed a chance to prove myself without the burden of my background. Your background? You mean reality? You don't understand what it's like, Mom. These people live in a different world. They summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen. They've never worried about money, never had to choose between groceries and medication, never had to work 2 jobs just to survive. I wanted to give Chelsea the life she deserves by lying to everyone, including me. How long before Chelsea discovers the truth? Daniel's face went pale as marble, she can't. If she finds out before the wedding ceremony, it's over. The Whitmores will destroy me. They have teams of lawyers, private investigators, connections with federal authorities. They'll make sure I never work in this city again, maybe even press criminal charges. You should have thought of that before building your life on lies and theft. Mom, please, I need you to stay quiet, just through tomorrow's ceremony. After the wedding, after we're legally married, I'll figure something out. I'll tell Chelsea everything, and we'll work through it together as husband and wife. As husband and wife, when it's too late for her to escape without a massive public scandal. That's not. I love her, Mom. Really, truly love her. Love doesn't lie, Daniel. Love doesn't steal from your mother's retirement fund. Love doesn't forge credit documents or create fake businesses. I stood up slowly, my decision crystallizing like ice forming on a window. I'm going to tell them. Tonight. Mom, no, you'll ruin everything. Everything is already ruined, son. The question is whether we're going to let an innocent family get destroyed by your lies. That's when we heard familiar voices approaching. Chelsea's melodic laughter mixed with her mother's cultured tones, and Daniel's expression transformed from panic to something much darker, much more desperate. If you say anything, he whispered with a coldness that chilled me to the bone, I'll deny everything. I'll tell them you're confused, possibly suffering from early dementia like Grandma did. Who do you think they'll believe? A successful businessman or a lonely widow who might be losing her mind? Daniel's threat hung in the air between us as Chelsea's voice grew closer. My son, the boy I'd raised to value honesty and integrity, was preparing to destroy my credibility to protect his lies. There you are. Chelsea appeared around the corner, radiant in her rehearsal dress. We were wondering where the groom disappeared to. And Mother Margaret, you look a bit pale. Are you feeling all right? I looked at my son, whose eyes held a warning, then at Chelsea, so trusting and happy. Just a bit tired, dear. It's been an exciting day. Well, come on. Daddy wants to make the toast, and we can't start without the mother of the groom. Chelsea linked her arm through mine. leading us back to the ballroom. The rehearsal dinner was a symphony of crystal glasses, soft music, and quiet conversation among people who'd never worried about money a day in their lives. I found myself seated at a table with the Whitmore family's closest friends, a federal judge, a bank president, and a woman who owned half the art galleries in the city. Margaret, the judge's wife, smiled warmly. You must be so proud. Daniel's company has such an impressive track record. Robert was telling us about the downtown development project. Development project? I glanced at Daniel, who was deep in conversation with Robert across the room. What other lies had he invented? He's always been ambitious, I managed. Ambitious and successful, the bank president added. I reviewed his financial portfolio personally when he applied for membership at the club. Very impressive diversification for someone his age. My heart pounded. The club? The Harbor Club. Exclusive membership, but Robert sponsored him. Young entrepreneurs of Daniel's caliber are exactly what we need to maintain the club's standards. The Harbor Club. Annual dues of $50,000. Membership fees that required a net worth verification. All based on fake documentation my son had somehow created. That's when Robert Whitmore stood up, tapping his champagne glass for attention. Friends, family, welcome to what I hope is the first of many celebrations for our children. Daniel, please stand. My son rose, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit, confident, charming, a complete lie. When Chelsea first told us about Daniel, Robert continued, I did what any protective father would do. I had him investigated. My blood went cold. Investigated? Daniel's face had gone pale, but he maintained his smile. What I found impressed me greatly. A young man who built a successful investment firm from nothing, who managed to accumulate substantial assets while maintaining the kind of integrity that's rare in today's business world. The room erupted in gentle applause. I watched Daniel accept congratulations, his relief evident. Robert's investigation had somehow missed the truth, or Daniel's lies were more sophisticated than I'd imagined. However, Robert raised his hand for silence. There was one small discrepancy in the financial records. The applause died. Daniel's smile faltered. Nothing concerning, Robert assured the room. Just a matter of some loan documentation that seems to show unusual co-signatory arrangements, but I'm sure it's simply a clerical error that can be resolved after the honeymoon. I felt the room spinning. Co-signatory arrangements. My credit. My name on loans I'd never seen or signed. That's when I realized the true scope of Daniel's deception. He hadn't just lied about having money. He'd stolen my financial identity to create his fake empire. And tomorrow, when the Whitmore family attorneys dig deeper into those clerical errors, they're going to discover that their future son-in-law is not just broke, he's a criminal. But first, they're going to come after me. The rest of Robert's speech passed in a nightmarish blur of polite applause and congratulatory toasts that felt like nails being hammered into my coffin. I smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, but my mind was racing through the terrifying implications of what I'd just learned. Daniel had used my personal information, my social security number, my credit history, my home as collateral, to secure fraudulent loans, quite possibly making me legally responsible for his $1.2 million mountain of debt. After dinner, as guests moved toward the hotel's elegant bar for after-dinner drinks and continued socializing, I managed to corner Daniel in the hallway outside the men's restroom. The corridor was quieter here, decorated with oil paintings of sailing ships and antique maritime instruments that probably cost more than most people's cars. We need to discuss those co-signatory arrangements your future father-in-law mentioned, I said quietly, my voice steady, despite the panic clawing at my chest. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes, instead studying the intricate pattern in the Persian carpet beneath our feet. Mom, it's complicated. Uncomplicated. Right now. Before I march back into that room and tell everyone exactly what kind of man their precious Chelsea is about to marry. He looked around frantically to ensure we were alone, then stepped closer and lowered his voice to barely above a whisper. Some of the larger loans required a co-signer with established credit history and property ownership. Your credit score has always been excellent, and you own your house outright. It made the application stronger. You forged my signature on loan documents. The words came out flat, emotionless, Because the alternative was screaming. I was desperate. The Whitmore family does extensive background checks on everyone Chelsea dates seriously. If they'd discovered I was broke, living paycheck to paycheck, it would have been over before it started. It is over, Daniel. When their lawyers investigate those discrepancies Robert mentioned, they're going to find fraud, identity theft, federal crimes. We're both going to be destroyed, but you're going to prison. No, we won't. Listen to me, Mom. I've got a plan. Your plans are what created this disaster in the first place. After the wedding ceremony tomorrow, once Chelsea and I are legally married, I'll confess everything to her privately, tell her I got in over my head trying to impress her family, that I made some poor financial decisions, but nothing that can't be fixed with time and effort. And the debt? The forged documents? The criminal fraud? The Whitmores have more money than they could spend in 10 lifetimes. Robert might even admire my initiative, my determination to better myself for his daughter's sake. I stared at my son in complete disbelief. You think he's going to admire criminal fraud? I think he's going to want to protect his daughter from public scandal. A quiet financial settlement, a structured payment plan, maybe even a legitimate position in one of his companies where I can actually earn my way to the success I claim to have. You're completely delusional. I'm being realistic. There's a difference. Rich people don't call the police over money problems. They call lawyers and accountants and make problems disappear quietly. That's when Chelsea appeared at the end of the hallway, slightly unsteady from champagne and glowing with happiness. What are you two plotting over here? Secret mother-son wedding conspiracies? Daniel's demeanor changed instantly, his arms sliding around her waist as he transformed back into the charming, successful businessman. Just making sure Mom knows how grateful I am for everything she's done for us over the years. Your mother is absolutely wonderful. Chelsea smiled at me with genuine warmth. Daddy was just telling his attorney friends how impressed he is with your family values. Raising such a successful son as a single mother after your husband passed away, he says that takes real character and strength. Daniel's father would be very proud, I managed to say, though the words felt like broken glass in my throat. What I didn't add was that Frank would have dragged our son to the police station personally before letting him destroy an innocent family with his lies. Well, I should get back upstairs and try to get some beauty sleep. Chelsea kissed Daniel's cheek softly. Big day tomorrow. And Mother Margaret, thank you again for being so understanding about all the wedding arrangements. I know traditional mothers sometimes want to be more involved in every detail, but Daniel explained how you prefer to let us young people handle everything ourselves. Understanding about arrangements? I looked at Daniel sharply, noting how he was suddenly very interested in straightening his tie. What specific arrangements, dear? Oh, the seating charts, the processional order, all that complicated family protocol stuff. Daniel said you specifically requested to be seated toward the back of the ceremony so you wouldn't accidentally distract attention from our special moment. The back, hidden away like an embarrassment, while Robert Whitmore walks his daughter down the aisle in a procession celebrating Daniel's fabricated success story, while 300 guests witness what they believe is the union of two successful families, completely unaware that half the equation is built on criminal fraud. How very thoughtful of me, I managed, my voice carrying just enough edge that Chelsea looked slightly confused. After she left for her room, I turned to Daniel with fury that had been building for hours. Seated in the back? Hidden away like a shameful secret? Mom, please try to understand. It's better if you're not too prominent tomorrow. If Robert's lawyers start asking detailed questions, if anyone begins digging deeper into the financial irregularities, you want me hidden so I can't accidentally reveal the truth. I want you protected. If this all falls apart tomorrow, I need you to have plausible deniability. You're just the proud mother who believed in her son's success story. The mother whose credit and property you stole to finance your lies. The mother who'll be perfectly fine once I make this right with the Whitmore family. I looked at my son, this stranger wearing Daniel's face and speaking with his voice, and realized something that should have been obvious months ago. I'd been so focused on being a supportive mother that I'd completely failed to raise an honest man. And now we were both about to pay a price that would destroy everything I'd worked for my entire life. Daniel, do you have any understanding of what you've done to me? To yourself? To that innocent girl who loves someone who doesn't actually exist? I understand that tomorrow I marry the woman I love more than life itself, and then we figure out how to build a real future together. Built on lies and fraud. Built on love. Everything else is just financial details that can be worked out. That's when I knew with absolute certainty that there was only one way this nightmare could end. And it wasn't going to be the fairy tale wedding Daniel was expecting. That night, alone in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my phone and realizing something that should have terrified me, but instead filled me with calm determination. I had nothing left to lose. Daniel had already stolen my retirement savings, forged my signature on legal documents, and planned to destroy my credibility if I threatened his fairy tale wedding. The sweet, accommodating mother was dead. Time to meet the woman who'd survived 38 years married to a steelworker and 40 years as a nurse dealing with doctors who thought they owned the world. I opened my laptop, the one Daniel had bought me last Christmas, probably with my own stolen money, and began researching. If my son had taught me anything over the past 2 years, it was that information was power, and I was about to become very powerful. First, I pulled up the Henderson Marketing website and found their employee directory. There was Daniel Sullivan, account executive, with his work email and phone number. I called the automated system and followed the prompts to check his employment status. Daniel Sullivan is currently employed with Henderson Marketing. For salary verification, please contact Human Resources during business hours. So that part was still true. He did work there, making his claimed $52,000 a year, which meant every penny of his claimed $2 million in assets was fabricated. Next, I researched the Harbor Club membership requirements. The website was discreetly elegant, all understated luxury and subtle exclusivity. Annual dues, $50,000. Initiation fee, $100,000. Net worth requirement, minimum $5 million in verified assets. Background check required, including credit report, tax returns, and bank statements going back 3 years. Daniel had somehow convinced these people he was worth $5 million. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. But the most interesting discovery came when I searched for Sullivan Investment Group online. There was indeed a company by that name, registered 18 months ago with the State Business Bureau. The address listed was my apartment. The registered agent was Daniel Sullivan. And according to the filing documents, the company's assets were listed as proprietary investment portfolio valued at $2.1 million. My son hadn't just lied about being wealthy. He'd created an entire fake company using my home address and filed legal documents claiming millions in assets that didn't exist. Federal fraud, multiple felonies, and enough evidence to send him to prison for 10 to 15 years. I should have been terrified for him. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. At 2 a.m, I made my first phone call. Henderson Marketing Night Security, this is Dave. Hi, Dave. This is Margaret Sullivan, Daniel Sullivan's mother. I'm so sorry to bother you this late, but there's been a family emergency, and I need to reach Daniel. His phone is going straight to voicemail. Oh no, I hope everything's okay. But ma'am, Daniel isn't here. Actually, he's been out all week on vacation. Getting married this weekend, I think. Right, of course. Silly me, I'm just worried about the family situation. Dave, you've been so helpful. Can you tell me, has Daniel seemed stressed lately about work? Any financial pressures or problems I should know about? Well, I probably shouldn't say this. But between you and me, Mrs. Sullivan, Daniel's been having some trouble. He's behind on a few big accounts, and there was some issue with an expense report last month. Nothing too serious, but Mr. Henderson had to have a talk with him. Thank you, Dave. You've been very kind. My second call was to the Grand Bellamy Hotel's night manager. This is Margaret Sullivan. I'm a guest in room 412. I'm the mother of the groom for tomorrow's wedding, and I've discovered some concerning information about the payment arrangements. How can I help you, Mrs. Sullivan? I need to know who's financially responsible for tomorrow's charges. The entire event, ceremony, reception, everything. Let me check. Yes, the account shows Mr. Daniel Sullivan as the primary contact, with Mr. Robert Whitmore as the secondary authorized party for any additional charges. And the current balance owed? The final payment of $47,000 is scheduled to be charged to Mr. Sullivan's account tomorrow morning. $47,000 that Daniel didn't have, being charged to credit cards that were probably already maxed out. By tomorrow afternoon, those charges would be declined, the hotel would demand immediate payment, and the Whitmore family would discover that their son-in-law-to-be couldn't afford the wedding he'd planned. But I wasn't going to wait for that slow-motion disaster, because I'd just realized something beautiful. I had the power to control exactly when and how this house of cards collapsed, and I was going to make sure it happened in the most public, humiliating way possible. Time for Daniel to learn what happens when you steal from your mother. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect weather that makes people believe in fairy tales and happy endings. I woke up at 5:30, alert and energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. Today was going to be interesting. I ordered room service, eggs Benedict and fresh fruit, charged to Daniel's account naturally, and ate while reviewing the notes I'd taken during my late-night research session. By 7 a.m., I was dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd been saving for special occasions. This definitely qualified. My first stop was the hotel's business center, where I printed out several documents I'd prepared. Daniel's employment verification from Henderson Marketing, the business registration for Sullivan Investment Group showing my apartment as the company address, and a credit report I'd pulled on myself showing all the fraudulent loans Daniel had taken in my name. My second stop was more delicate. I knocked on Robert Whitmore's suite at exactly 8 a.m. "Margaret!" He opened the door in his silk robe, looking surprised but pleased. "You're up early. Wedding day excitement?" "Something like that, Robert. I'm sorry to bother you, but I've discovered some information about Daniel that I think you need to see before the ceremony." His expression immediately became serious. "Of course. Come in." The Whitmore suite was larger than my entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor and furniture that belonged in a museum. Robert gestured for me to sit while he poured coffee from a silver service. "What's this about, Margaret?" I handed him the printed documents. "I'm afraid Daniel hasn't been entirely honest about his financial situation." Robert's face went through several emotions as he read: confusion, concern, and finally a cold anger that reminded me why successful businessmen were not people you wanted to cross. "These loan documents show your name as co-signer, without my knowledge or consent. I discovered last night that Daniel has been using my personal information to secure fraudulent loans totaling over $1 million. Margaret, are you certain about this? I've spent the entire night verifying every detail. The Sullivan Investment Group is a shell company registered to my apartment. Daniel works at Henderson Marketing making $52,000 a year. Everything else, the portfolio, the assets, the business success, it's all fabricated." Robert set down the papers with the careful control of a man fighting to contain his fury. "Do you understand what you're telling me? That my daughter is about to marry a criminal? I'm telling you that my son has committed multiple felonies and implicated me in federal fraud charges. But more importantly, he's lied to your daughter about everything: who he is, what he has, what kind of life he can provide. Why are you bringing this to me instead of going to the police?" I met his eyes directly. "Because Chelsea deserves to hear the truth before she makes a decision that will destroy her life. And because you have the power to handle this quietly, without destroying her reputation along with his." Robert was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to give me 30 minutes alone with Daniel before the ceremony. Let me try to convince him to tell Chelsea the truth himself. And if he refuses, then I'll tell her myself." In front of everyone. Robert's smile was cold and predatory. "Margaret, I think I've been underestimating you. Most people do. It's one of my advantages." He stood up, suddenly all business. "I'll arrange for Daniel to meet you in the hotel manager's office at 10:30. The ceremony isn't until noon, so you'll have privacy and time." "Thank you, Robert." "Don't thank me yet. If your son has defrauded my family, I'll make sure he faces the full consequences of his actions." I gathered my documents and headed for the door. I wouldn't expect anything less. As I walked back to my room, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't the victim in this story. I was the one with the power to choose how it ended, and I'd already decided exactly what Daniel's ending was going to look like. At 10:25, I was sitting in the hotel manager's office when Daniel walked in wearing his wedding tuxedo. He looked handsome and confident, every inch the successful groom about to marry the woman of his dreams. That was about to change. "Mom, what's this about? Robert said you needed to see me urgently, but Chelsea's getting ready and I have photos in 20 minutes. Sit down, Daniel." Something in my tone made him pause. "Is everything okay? You look different." "I spent last night doing research about Sullivan Investment Group, about your employment status, about the loan documents you forged with my name." I spread the papers across the manager's desk like a poker player revealing a winning hand. Daniel's face went white. "Mom, I can explain." "No more explanations. No more lies. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk upstairs right now and tell Chelsea everything. The real numbers, the fake company, the forged documents, all of it." "I can't do that. The wedding starts in an hour. There are 300 guests downstairs. The reception is paid for." "The reception that you can't afford? The $47,000 final payment that's going to be declined when they run your credit card this afternoon?" Daniel slumped into the chair like a punctured balloon. "How did you—" "I know everything, Daniel, including the fact that you've committed multiple federal crimes that could send you to prison for 15 years. Mom, please, give me a chance to make this right after the wedding. Once Chelsea and I are married, once you're married, you'll have destroyed her life along with yours. Robert Whitmore doesn't forgive people who lie to his family, and he definitely doesn't forgive people who defraud them. What do you want me to do? Humiliate myself in front of everyone? Destroy my relationship with the only woman I've ever loved?" I leaned forward, my voice gentle but implacable. "I want you to be the man your father would have been proud of. Tell the truth, face the consequences, and give Chelsea the choice you should have given her from the beginning." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "What if she leaves me? Then she leaves you. But at least she'll be making that decision based on reality instead of lies. And if I don't? If I go through with the wedding anyway?" I stood up, straightening my jacket. "Then I'll stand up during the ceremony and tell everyone exactly what kind of man Chelsea is about to marry." Daniel's face crumpled. "You wouldn't do that to me. I wouldn't do it to the Daniel I raised. But that Daniel wouldn't have stolen from his mother to impress a woman with lies. Mom, please." "You have 15 minutes to decide, Daniel. Tell Chelsea yourself, or I'll tell everyone." I walked toward the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I hope you make the right choice. It's not too late to be the man you should have been all along." I left him sitting there in his expensive tuxedo, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, finally facing the consequences of 2 years of lies. 15 minutes later, I was in the lobby when I saw Daniel getting into the elevator, heading up to Chelsea's bridal suite. 10 minutes after that, I heard the screaming start. The screaming from Chelsea's bridal suite could be heard 3 floors down. Hotel staff were discreetly ushering guests away from the elevator area, but the sound of a woman's voice raised in fury and betrayal was unmistakable. I was sitting in the lobby, pretending to read a magazine, when Robert Whitmore appeared at my elbow. His face was grim, but there was something like respect in his eyes. "You gave him the chance to do the right thing," he said quietly. "I did. What he chose to do with that chance was up to him. Chelsea's destroying her room. 3 bridesmaids are crying. Daniel locked himself in the bathroom." I folded my magazine calmly. "What happens now?" "Now I make some phone calls. My attorney is already reviewing the loan documents you provided. If everything checks out the way you've presented it, Daniel will be facing federal fraud charges by Monday morning. And Chelsea," Robert's expression softened slightly, "Chelsea will heal. She's stronger than people give her credit for. In 6 months, she'll realize she dodged a bullet. I'm sorry this happened to your family, Robert. Don't be. You saved my daughter from making the biggest mistake of her life. If Daniel had gone through with this wedding, if she'd found out after they were married," he shook his head, "the damage would have been irreparable." That's when the elevator doors opened and Daniel emerged, looking like he'd been through a war. His tuxedo was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and there were scratch marks on his cheek where Chelsea had apparently expressed her feelings about his deception. He saw me sitting in the lobby and walked over with the defeated posture of a man who'd finally run out of lies. "She's not coming down," he said quietly. "The wedding's off." "I know. She called me things I didn't even know she knew how to say." "I imagine she did." Daniel sat down heavily in the chair next to mine. "Robert says they're pressing charges, criminal fraud, identity theft, forgery. I could go to prison for 10 years. You committed crimes, Daniel. Criminal charges are usually what happens next. Aren't you going to say you're sorry? That you didn't want this to happen? I looked at my son, this stranger who'd stolen my money and destroyed my trust, and realized I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. No, Daniel, I'm not sorry. You made choices that hurt innocent people, including me. You could have stopped this at any point in the last 2 years, but you chose to keep lying instead. So this is my punishment? Prison? Losing Chelsea? Having my life destroyed? This is the consequence of your actions. There's a difference. Daniel was quiet for a moment. What's going to happen to you? The loan documents with your name. Robert's attorneys are already working on that. Apparently, proving identity theft is relatively straightforward when you have a victim who's willing to cooperate with prosecutors. You're going to testify against me. I'm going to tell the truth about what you did to me. What you choose to call that is up to you. Daniel stood up slowly. I guess this is goodbye then. I guess it is. He started to walk away, then turned back. Mom? I really did love her. I know you did, Daniel. But love isn't enough when it's built on lies. I watched my son walk away, probably for the last time, and felt something unexpected. Peace. For 2 years, I'd been carrying the weight of his lies without knowing it. Now, finally, that weight was lifted. Time to figure out what the rest of my life was going to look like. 6 months later, I was sitting on the deck of my new cottage in coastal Maine, watching the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean and thinking about how much can change when you finally stop letting other people define your worth. The criminal trial had been swift and decisive. Daniel pleaded guilty to multiple federal fraud charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The restitution order required him to pay back every penny he'd stolen, though since he had no assets, that was largely symbolic. The civil lawsuit was more interesting. Robert Whitmore's attorneys had pursued the case with the kind of relentless efficiency that only unlimited legal resources can provide. They'd recovered some of the stolen money by seizing Daniel's personal property and garnishing his wages for the next 20 years. But more importantly, they'd cleared my name completely from all fraudulent loan documents. The victim of identity theft bears no responsibility for debts incurred through criminal fraud, Robert's lead attorney had explained to me. Your son will be paying for his crimes for the rest of his life, but you're free and clear. Free and clear. I liked the sound of that. The insurance settlement from my identity theft case had been substantial enough to buy this cottage outright, something I'd never imagined owning, a place where I could wake up to ocean views and fall asleep to the sound of waves, where no one needed anything from me except what I chose to give. Chelsea had sent me a card last month, forwarded through Robert's office. She was engaged again, this time to a law school classmate she'd known for years. Someone who's exactly who he says he is, she'd written. Thank you for saving me from a life built on lies. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that Daniel had tried to contact me several times from prison, but I'd instructed the attorneys to decline all communication. There was nothing left to say. He'd made his choices, and I'd made mine. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who ran the village bookstore. Tuesday book club meeting moved to Thursday. Hope you can still make it. I smiled. Typing back, wouldn't miss it. This was my life now. Book clubs and morning walks on the beach. Volunteer work at the local food bank and evening dinners with neighbors who liked me for who I was, not what I could do for them. A life where my worth wasn't measured by how much money I could lend or how many problems I could solve for other people. The sun was fully up now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that took my breath away. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to Frank, who would have been proud of how this story ended. Thanks for teaching me to stand up for myself, honey, I said to the ocean breeze. It just took me a while to remember how. My phone rang, startling me out of my peaceful moment. Unknown number, but local area code. Mrs. Sullivan? This is Detective Martinez with the state police. I'm calling about your son Daniel's case. There's been a development. My heart clenched. What kind of development? We've discovered that your case wasn't isolated. Daniel was part of a larger fraud ring that victimized over 30 families. We'd like you to testify at a congressional hearing about identity theft and elder financial abuse. I sat up straighter. You want me to speak publicly about what happened? Your story could help change federal laws to better protect people like you. Would you be willing to consider it? I looked out at the ocean, thinking about all the other mothers who might be getting phone calls from desperate children, writing checks they couldn't afford, trusting people who were stealing their futures. Yes, I said firmly. I'd be very willing to help. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Apparently, my story wasn't over yet. It was just beginning a new chapter, one where I got to be the hero instead of the victim. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.